Greetings and salutations, friends, and well, today we're going to be talking about the second Witcher trailer, which dropped on, let me check, yes, the last day of October. And I am recording this right as November is nearing its end, because I am an early bird like that when it comes to media. But, as they say, better late than never. So let's dive right in and see if the second trailer is at least somewhat better than the first. I have, of course, seen it already previously, some time ago, but I don't really remember that much of it. I remember a few scenes, but mostly this will be me reacting in a very unscripted manner. So let's just take a look at this, shall we?
I've heard tales of your kind, Witcher.
So, let me just pause it right here before the first big action scene. We have a shot of the Slaughter of Sintra, which looks nice. There's not a whole lot to say. I mean, they'll probably show it to be sufficiently brutal, so I have nothing to really say about that. Then we transition to a couple of shots of Yennefer opening her eyes, and I think this is all happening in Blaviken, all these shots in this very foggy city. I think all of this is Blaviken. I am not sure what Geralt's holding in his other hand. Let me just check that real quick.
I've heard tales of.
No, I can't say what it is. It could be his medallion, it could be some kind of a flask, it could be any number of things. I'm thinking of the Lesser Evil, the story, whether he holds something like that, but I got nothing for now, so let's just move on.
Of your kind, Witcher.
Now, we'll be seeing more of the choreography throughout the trailer, but so far I'm not willing to give out any specific judgments because it's all very cut up and it would be premature to judge anything based on a few trailer shots. But I have to say I already am not sure whether I like where they're going because I could at least notice that the guy right here on the left apparently went down to a cut in the stomach, like a slash at the gut. And I think he's one of the Nilfgaardian soldiers who are wearing that. Well, I'm not sure whether I can call it armor. Like he's wearing one of the props. I'm sorry, I can't call that breastplate or any other real kind of armor because it's just too goddamn ugly. But yes, he also cut the soldier across the stomach, and the sword seemed to go right through. So yeah, I'm worried that we'll go once again with the route of armor doesn't actually do anything in the setting, which would be a shame, especially now that movies have actually started to take note that armor was actually used for a purpose throughout history, and films like The Outlaw King and even the more recent King on Netflix both did a fairly good job of portraying that. You've got knights bashing each other over the heads with maces, warhammers, you've got people using the mercy daggers and literally drowning each other in mud because you just can't really pierce armor, good armor, with a sword. Now, of course, it's possible that the Nilfgaardian armor is extremely shitty, not just in design, but also in its practicality, which, it would be a a very ironic situation if the most powerful military in the world had the worst armor in the world, and that this will be reserved for the Nilfgaardian soldiers, but I am somewhat skeptical. Again, I don't want to judge the choreography of combat completely because we haven't seen that much of it, but if armor is once again not going to really count for anything, yeah, that's not going to be a good idea, especially because Gerald has, throughout the books, displayed a lot of craftiness when dealing with armored opponents, and of course, he always prefers to fight people who aren't all that armored. But there's no real, slashing through steel breastplates or pauldrons or anything like that. Now, of course, in the game, it doesn't really matter who is going up against you. You can still literally cut him in half. But the games are the games, and they have a certain combat mechanic. And even in the games, like, most of the opponents you fight are unarmored, the human opponents, that is. In regards to the armor controversy, I think I've heard a very interesting article. Heard an article, of course. I saw a very interesting article where they were trying to justify the design, and it went something along the lines of, this is a very early design when Nilfgaard was still only getting its own footing, and and we will see the Nilfgaardian army evolve as the series progresses. Which, I mean, as long as you say so, it's better than nothing, but your argument is already shit, and you have to know it. Because the Nilfgaardians have been expanding northwards for centuries. Like, these are called the Northern Wars because Nilfgaardians are essentially fighting the last 5 kingdoms which are still standing in their way in the north. They have conquered and vassalized everybody else. So to say that the Nilfgaardian army is still trying to find its bearings, it's absolutely ludicrous for so many reasons. But as long as you change that armor into something less catastrophic somewhere down the line, I'll be perfectly content. Let's move on. We get another shot of what I still presume to be Fanad. I still can't think of a different place which this could be, and it still saddens me greatly, but whatever will you do.
You're a mutant. Created by magic.
I'm wondering whether we'll get to see something of how Geralt was created. Well, these shots, the last shot where he opens his eyes, definitely were not the shots from some kind of flashback in which, he'd be created, because he was way too old at that point.
Roaming the continent.
I'm going to just put it back right here a little bit. And we finally see Dandelion, and he looks okay. Like, we don't really see a whole lot of him from this angle, but the outfit is decent enough, and he's got his instruments, so that's always a bonus. I'm wondering how hammy the actor is going to try and play him, because if you only played the games, you probably wouldn't realize this, but Dandelion is a fairly serious character in the story. Like, he is still the comic relief of the group, and he is basically worthless in any kind of fight. But he is a lot more serious, and he acts as something of Geralt's conscience in many of the stories, and in the main saga as well. So I'm wondering how hammy the actor is going to try and portray him, because in the games, like, he was just a comedic sidekick in the extreme. It's one of the few things I'd say the games got wrong about the books. Like, Dandelion, he is not only funny, like unintentionally funny, but he is also a very insightful guy, and he understands people. He doesn't really understand logical thinking as well, but he understands what drives people and what people are motivated to do in certain situations. And he even manages to understand Geralt after some time, even though Geralt, by most accounts, should be stripped of emotions and emotional reactions towards events.
Continent.
We don't want your kind here.
Hunting monsters.
Now we got a few shots here. First off, we got right here Geralt using a sign. I like the effect they're using for the sign. You can see that it's something unnatural, something magical, but it's not, just outright flashy magic of the sort like Harry Potter and so on. I think this is the art sign. Well, I can't really think of any other sign which would do something like this. And I'm wondering whether they are going to try and incorporate the signs from the games. Because Sapkowski doesn't really describe how the individual signs should be made. He merely says Geralt displayed the Igni sign, or he displayed the art sign, and this happened, and this happened. And I believe the games actually lifted these signs from actual sign language of some sort, which I always found pretty cool. So I'm wondering which route they'll go with this. And then we of course have the monster. Now, I can't really recall anything like this from the books, but I can certainly think of a few things it could be. Like, first of all, this really reminds you of a ghoul. Like, this just screams ghoul to me. It's not a bad design, but again, I was hoping they wouldn't go with too much CGI. Like, I can understand the, big monsters being CGI in their portrayal, but to have human-sized monsters, even if they're supposed to be, these small and nimble things, be so evidently CGI, I don't know. I really appreciate that they made the Striga at least partially a costume.
For a price. I thought you'd have fangs or horns or something.
I had them filed down.
Not sure why this stopped just now, but either way. This little exchange, to the best of my knowledge, doesn't actually happen in the books, and it certainly doesn't happen under these circumstances. In fact, what's going on behind Geralt right there looks like something straight out of ancient Rome, just some kind of mad orgy. And I'm wondering where this is supposed to be taking place. Again, it's not like the sorcerers and sorceresses are not insanely, sickeningly promiscuous in the books. But I can't really recall an event like this taking place. Because, for example, the Faned Ball. Like, after the ball, a lot of private affairs go on around the castle in all kinds of places amidst most of the guests. But those all happen in their own chambers and between couples, well, mostly couples. And the ball itself is actually a rather formal affair. Besides, I doubt we're going to see the Faned Ball just yet. Certainly not in the first season. And Yennefer actually receives Geralt for the first time as an employer almost. Well, not exactly an employer. Geralt comes basically for help to Yennefer. And Yennefer, well, I don't want to spoil all of it. Well, I'm already spoiling a lot of things, so I don't know why I bother. But basically, they meet under a lot more formal circumstances, and this is definitely their first meeting in the show. So I'm wondering what they're going for in reworking it. I'm wondering whether the genie story is going to be included at all, because this is definitely not a part of any story. Actually, I can't think of any event where Geralt and Yennefer were, which would look like this. So yeah. As for the dialogue, well, it's actually fairly good, and I do like Cavill's delivery of the lines. Again, if all else fails, I think Cavill at least will be remembered fondly, because you can see he tries. You can see he tries to portray Geralt as the games would voice him and as the books would write him to be. I'm not giving out judgments yet. It's possible that he might try and overdo it. It's possible that he might simply not get certain parts of the character, and it's also perfectly possible that I'm simply reading way too much or way too little into some things. But I don't want to judge prematurely from the trailers, but he has made a good impression on me from all I saw. Yennefer's actress, I can't really say either way. Could go either way. I haven't seen anything in which she played again, so I'm still waiting to carry out any kind of sentence in that regard.
Down.
And I have no idea what this is. I saw other people on the internet speculating about what this place could be. It's got to be a place of power, naturally. But if you look closely, you can see another one here and something which looks similar, but it could also be a lot bigger than this one in the distance. So I'm not sure what these are supposed to be. Maybe I'm just forgetting something from the books completely. If I am, be sure to let me know, but I can't think of anything which would match the description from the books or the games.
People call you
which story this is a part of. Like, this looks very interesting. Blood on Snow. Maybe it's the Striga? We'll see.
Monster too. Why not?
And from what we see later, this is supposed to be Rentfree. Ha! It hit me now. I know what it is Gerald is carrying in that initial shot. It's this medallion? Pin? I think I'll call it pin. She has on her shirt. Now, we of course all know, whoever the books, how the story of the Lesser Evil ends. And Rentfree, I mean, it's not as bad as some of the other castings they have already shown, but I still would have preferred her original look. Short blonde hair and the ridiculous checkered skirt she actually used in combat. I mean, her design's okay, it's just a lot more ordinary in my opinion. But it's nowhere near the worst castings I have seen coming from this show.
Kill them.
Because then I am what they say I am.
And the line she delivers, like, people think you're a monster too, why not kill them? I'm hoping that is like a mashed together pair of lines, because that makes no sense, and there is never a conversation between Rentfree and Geralt, I think, which even implies something like this. Like, Rentfree never asks Geralt to kill anyone. Like, she just doesn't want Geralt interfering with her. So I'm wondering how they're going to spin that story as well. I would really hope that they stick to the source material, at least for the Lesser Evil in this one, because it's one of my absolute favorite stories. So please, 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 don't change it too much. And now we see what I think is the Battle of Sintra. Like, the Rape of Sintra and the Battle of Sintra are two distinct events. Like, the battle was where the Sintran army got annihilated, and the rape was the sacking of the city, Sintra itself. Yeah, I haven't really got a whole lot to say about this. It's just a giant brawl, as we've grown accustomed to seeing in movies, so that's still a shame.
All of our choices draw our destinies closer.
If he is out there, there is still hope.
I really don't like the idea of Calante. I think it's Calante talking to Ciri. It could be someone else, but I can't imagine who. But I really don't like the idea of anyone telling Ciri to go and find Geralt of Rivia. Like, one of the big things in the big books I've ranted about is in the previous reaction, so I'm only going to touch upon it briefly. But the big thing about the books, and something I really like about them, is that they really have a sense of destiny. It's a set of unlikely coincidences, which are in fact not coincidences at all, which lead to very improbable things happening. And of course, Ciri and Geralt are destined to each other, so they keep bumping into each other, even though initially neither of them really wants to. So, Calante just telling Ciri to go and find Geralt for some reason, still can't think of any reason why she would actually say that. Yeah, that's not a good thing, in my opinion. So we see Ciri in Brokilon, and I'm wondering what those lights are. There's a really interesting tidbit, and I hope, at least in this regard, they won't destroy the Dryads. There's a really interesting tidbit in the books about how the Dryads use other sources of illumination. Like, I think they use a special kind of magical plant for it. I can't recall exactly, but I know that Dandelion accidentally goes to set fire, and Geralt just tells him, "You do that, and you're dead within seconds." There is no fire allowed within Brokilon, and the Dryads use other light sources when they require them, but they generally don't really require any either way, and they certainly don't require a source of heat, because they are, well, mutated into being a part of the forest, essentially. So I'm wondering whether that's going to be, or whether that's just a really bright light, like an effect. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm just reading way too much into a single shot again.
I have to find Geralt of Rivia.
Well, we can also very clearly see in here that Gerald is just cutting through very well-looking cuirasses. In this case, like they're absolutely nothing, like they're just butter, which is once again unfortunate. But we at least see him go for this guy's face, so it's not going to be completely unrealistic. And as for the choreography, again, I will have to wait and watch a full fight scene to carry out any kind of real verdict upon them. And do please bear in mind that I'm merely a European martial arts enthusiast, not an actual expert. I have done them myself, and I do have some practice, but there's still a whole lot of things I might be wrong about or missing. But I'm just going to say what it looks like to me, and for now I'm going to refrain from giving any real opinion, except I really hope they don't treat armor like it's jelly.
Don't judge me.
And this is a really nice little exchange. I do hope they make Roach an actual character, like she eventually became in the games. Because the little exchanges Gerald has throughout the books, he doesn't usually talk directly to Roach, but Roach always seems to be something of a character of her own, no matter what iteration of her it is.
They say witches can't feel human emotion. What do you believe in?
Evil is evil.
Now, I think it's confirmed that this is Cahir. I haven't actually checked up on who is playing Cahir in the story, so I can't be 100% certain. But I can't think of any other Nilfgaardian upon whom they would focus this much in the first season. I have to say he looks a lot older than he should be at this point, because Cahir, even in the last book, he's still pretty young. Like, he's what, 21, 22 at best? And this is taking place a couple of years before the book's end. So I think he should have been played by someone slightly younger. And of course it doesn't help for me to take him seriously when he's dressed in that. But the biggest problem is that Cahir is already without his helmet, which is a real shame. And I'm wondering why they would choose to do that, because Cahir is a deliberate play, in my opinion, on the evil knight trope in fantasy. When we first see Cahir, we see him as a nightmare in Ciri's dreams. Like, she literally has PTSD from what he did to her. She sees him as this almost demonic figure chasing her through her dreams and catching up to her, and she always wakes up whenever he eventually inevitably catches up. And the scariest thing about him is that he is completely faceless. He has an awesome knightly helmet adorned with black raven wings, Jesus, which he never takes down for the first couple of books. And he is basically the boogeyman for Cirilla. He is the guy she fears the most, and so when she eventually meets him again, under very unlikely circumstances, she freaks out, and it's a very powerful moment. And I'm going to spoil this part of the story, so if you haven't yet read the books and want to preserve yourself for that, skip ahead for like 5 minutes. I should be done talking about it by now, so here we go. Ciri has a fight with Cahir, who is sent there to capture her once again, and she wins. She defeats Cahir. She basically cuts up his hands and legs so that she immobilizes him. And Cahir, it's at this point, I can't recall whether it's just his helmet which falls off or whether he actually takes it down. I think it just falls off. And Cirilla sees that he's not a monster beneath the helmet. In fact, she actually finds him very pretty because, well, he is a young boy from a noble family, so naturally she'd find him somewhat attractive. But the biggest thing about it is that he's afraid. Like, he is pissing himself in fear because here there's this small, skinny girl who has utterly defeated me. And Cahir is no slouch in combat. He is a very good warrior. And here this girl with no armor and whom he once had seen as this frightened child is standing over him, sword in hand, ready to kill him. And he is just terrified of her. And that's a very powerful thing for Ciri in the next couple of books, because she overcomes her first great fear. But she only overcomes a boogeyman. Cahir never wanted to actually harm Ciri, he only wanted to capture her. And he was not a malicious guy. So when Ciri meets an actual monster, well, it has a detrimental effect on her mental health, let's say.
Bless her.
I think the person here is the same person who's supposed to be Mian. I'm just throwing it out because I have no idea who exactly this is, but I think this is supposed to be Mian. But it's just that the two actors look very much alike if they are not the same person. And I'm just commenting on it because still nothing about him speaks of being, from a different culture or being of a specific standing. Just my 2 cents on the issue.
Greater. Meddling.
And now this is really interesting because this is definitely Ciri's escape from Cahir. Here you can see that they did actually include his feathered helmet initially. And I'm wondering what is going on here, because Ciri escapes from Cahir under much more mundane circumstances in the story. Like, it's not literally the earth splitting open to allow Cirilla to escape. So I'm wondering who is interfering. Like, there are sorcerers who are powerful enough to have the earth just split open at that point, but I have no idea who could be doing this. And again, I'm really, really sad that Cahir does not get to keep his helmet on for the entirety of the first season, because it's just a shame, in my opinion, to spoil that big reveal. Of course, it could still happen just exactly as it did in the books, but it's not going to be as much of a reveal for the audience as it was in the books, because we already know that Cahir is just your average guy under the helmet, and that he is actually capable of being afraid himself.
It's all the same.
So now we see Fringe Allah, who you would not recognize as Fringe Allah if you read the books. That's all I'm going to say about the issue. But I am actually happy. I know I don't say this often, but I am actually happy that we are going to see more of Fringe Allah in the show. Because Fringe Allah has a bit of a history with especially Yennefer before she is actually introduced in the books, and it's going to do the audience good to actually see that history, not merely have characters reminisce about it in retrospect. And we see also another mage performing some kind of spell back there, so I think it's also going to be a good idea to very clearly contrast how mages are treated in Nilfgaard and how they are treated in the north, where in the north they are these untouchable magnets and bureaucrats and basically their own masters. They have their own little society to which they answer first and foremost, whereas in Nilfgaard they are basically the emperor's slaves, just like everybody else. But anyway, it's going to do us good to see more of Fringe Allah before she has her big part in the story to play. Again, I just wish they'd cast someone who actually looks like Fringe Allah, and especially someone who looks like Yennefer for the story, but minor, inconsequential details, I am certain. And I have no idea what's going on here. There is no part of the books which takes place in the desert this early on, and when it does, Jesus, I went forward. I wanted to go back. And when it eventually does, Yennefer does not participate in it. And I'm also not sure who the antagonists there in the back are supposed to be, or what the guy in the golden helmet is dragging in the sand. Like, there are a few monsters which can burrow into the sand, and Ciri actually meets one of them, I think, in the desert. But none of this takes place this early on. It's all very late into the story. Well, approximately midway to second third of the story when Ciri ends up in Korath Desert, so I have no idea what's going on here. And here we see Geralt fighting Rentfree. Again, I'm really sad they didn't give her the skirt. I know it's ludicrous for her to actually try and fight with a skirt, but it made her so interesting in the books. It was one of those unique quirks that most people who got sent to kill Geralt had. Well, not just who got sent to kill Geralt, but genuinely the villains in the books they all had their little gimmick. So yeah, I wish they made her closer to her book design, but then again, as long as she's at least true in character, she is a passable cast in my opinion.
Princess Cirilla is your destiny.
Yeah, so that's definitely the same guy. It's definitely Mian, and I think this is actually the first time I saw. No, he's still wearing the same thing. He's still wearing the same doublet. That's just unfortunate.
Destiny.
I can't protect her.
So, I'm unsure who Yennefer is dancing here with. Well, this is once again the Slaughter of Sintra. They're hyping it up to be a big event, so I'm hoping it lives up to its reputation, even if it's going to be carried out by people dressed as clowns. But as long as there's sufficient brutality to communicate just how unprecedented this was in the North, I'll be satisfied.
Is your destiny.
So I'm not... God damn it. I'm not sure what event this is and who this king is supposed to be. It could be any one of the four kings, really, seeing as they had a very loose casting policy when it comes to how the characters are described in the books. But supposing this is either Vizimir, who is the king of Redania, or more likely, this is Foltest, who is probably the most prominently featured of the kings within the story. So I'm not sure what this event is going to be, but then again, we are getting a lot more of Yennefer's backstory visualized, so I think it's open to interpretation.
I can't protect her.
If you dismiss it,
Geralt!
you will unleash true calamity upon us all.
I'll take that chance.
No, I'm going to go over the last clip by clip. I'm not even going to play it anymore because you've seen how horrible I am at actually pausing in time. I have too low reaction speed, I know. So, this, I believe, is Tisaya Devri, looking down at something. This would appear to be after some kind of battle, so I'm wondering whether we are actually going to get to see the Battle of Sodden Hill. I doubt it. I think it's something they're going to try and preserve for a second season, perhaps as an opening, but I wouldn't be surprised if we got a cut down version of the events. And I think Tisaya did participate in Sodden Hill. I'm not 100% certain, but I think she was there, and she definitely looks upset. And she has good reason to be if this is Sodden, because a lot of her pupils died at Sodden. I just said I wouldn't even press it anymore. Now then we see Cyrilla having some kind of, I guess this is a vision. She does have more than a few visions in the books, and I don't remember if one of them was completely red, but many of them certainly did have a theme of blood being spilled in them. So this is probably her just not being able to control her powers once again. Yeah. And it looks like the entire... God damn it. I'll get to that in a second. First, we have the Battle of Sintra. I suppose this is. Like, I don't think this is Sodden because we only see Sintran soldiers in here, and besides, the Battle of Sodden Hill is actually supposed to take place on a hill, not just on a highland, but I digress. But the only thing I'm wondering, like, did your cavalry fall asleep? First of all, what are all your cavalrymen doing in the front line, in the center, and not on the flanks? And second of all, did you actually fall asleep behind the wheel? I think this is the army commander, the woman we saw leading the army, which I still have no idea whether that's supposed to be Kelantan or her daughter or whoever else. I think she's actually charging in the front line, which is just ludicrous to me for a number of reasons, but not as ludicrous as the cavalry charging barely, what is that, 50 meters from the charging enemy infantry. Who thought this was a good idea? Honestly. Oh, this battle, I can already sense it in my bones. It's going to be such a mess and such a joke. At least we've seen that not all Nilfgaardian soldiers are actually only armed with swords. Some of them do actually seem to be carrying axes, which is nice, at least some diversity in the weapons department. But again, like, did the Nilfgaardians seriously manage to catch the Sintrans unawares? Not only are they, charging their cavalry basically to their own deaths from the front, but they also have this massive gap here in between, which I am not certain what the purpose of it is, but it almost looks like they were in marching formation and they got caught unawares and they failed to deploy in time. Oh Jesus, this is going to be interesting to say the least.
True calamity.
Yes, and this is what I originally wanted to comment upon. It looks like this is going to be a completely original subplot they put into the books, because this woman is the same woman Yennefer is running around in the desert later on, and it looks like somebody is attacking them and pursuing them. And I can't really recall even a mentioned subplot which would involve this from the books. So I'm guessing this is a completely original storyline, and I'm wondering what it is they are going to try and do with that, because it definitely has potential. You'd have something of a chase where Yennefer and this woman are being chased by someone, something, and Gerald is chasing the someone and something. So we'll see. It has potential. I just hope it won't turn out to be a really, really bad story that replaced one of the actual, good stories from the books.
Upon us all.
And there we have an explosion which could only have been caused by magic. Well, technically it looks like a typical gunpowder explosion, but gunpowder is not really used in the Witcher world, and unless they make some pretty drastic changes in this regard as well, which at this point I wouldn't be surprised, but if they don't change it up, then magic is the only thing which could be causing this. And we also see a second explosion on the right of a similar design, so the fortress is definitely under attack by mages. And again, I don't recognize this place, nor do I recognize any of the characters present in the shot, so it could be basically anywhere at basically any time. But what I'm hoping is that we'll actually get to see the Nilfgaardian conquest in detail, because they did mention that Nilfgaardian mages were instrumental in breaching the gates of Sintra. Now, of course, they were instrumental because the gates of Sintra were actually enchanted to be able to withstand unusual amounts of physical damage, and so busting it out open with magic was the least problematic solution. But I'm still wondering whether we're going to get to see more of what the Nilfgaardians do, because that's one of the strong suits of the books. They don't initially show you just how bad the Nilfgaardians are, and until the later books, when you get to actually see in detail how a Nilfgaardian conquest looks like. But seeing as the show is of course operating on a different timetable and probably doesn't want to hype up Nilfgaard as much, because we are already getting to see the Battle of Sintra and probably the Battle of Sodden Hill, I'm wondering whether they are going to show Nilfgaardian conquests of smaller fortresses and cities, no, cities, towns, I should say, in detail. I can't really think of anything else this could be.
I'll take that chance.
So the final few shots are just a couple of poses, nothing to really speak about. I do like the inclusion of runes in this shot. I hope that runes are actually going to be, visible on some of Geralt's equipment, because they're a fairly important bit within the story. But that's not one of my priorities. And I think that's approximately everything. So, that was the second trailer for The Witcher. My thoughts in general are it was actually a lot better than the first one in terms of the music used and the shots we were given, but there was also a lot more filler, which is probably why this video is going to be a bit shorter than the first one, although I haven't actually checked the time, so yeah, this statement might end up being somewhat hilarious. But either way, I don't really have any overtly bad feelings about this. Like, it's certainly not going to be as bad as the reveal of the Dryads in the previous trailer or anything like that. So, I'm fairly optimistic. It has potential to adapt the old well enough, and also to give us a couple of new stories, which I am in doubt as to whether they would be better than what they omit, but I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. And the fight choreography, again, I'm not going to comment until I actually get to see it within the episodes. It's I have mixed feelings at this point, especially due to the armor, not working. And this is one thing I should probably address. Some people might make the argument, oh, but the Witchers have special swords, so they could be able to cut through any substance and so on. The Witchers don't use Valyrian steel. They don't use swords that can magically cut through any substance. They just use very, very well made swords. That's pretty much it. There's not a whole lot more to say. So, and we do have in the books multiple instances of Geralt using other tactics than he generally does against heavily armored opponents, such as knights. So, yeah, I am hoping they are going to pull it off smoothly. I still have hope, but I also have major concerns. So, until next time, I wish you all a good day.